Musgrove. And if you want to find out more of my bio, you can ask me later when we're out of here. But pretty much we are going through a history of Suwannee County. We're about on number, I think this is number 19 of 36 or so presentations. And we are on Ruby McCollium, which always seems to be the presentation with the most amount of people, whether it's locals coming or people that have not lived here all their lives and they come here to find out what's going on. So you will see down here at the bottom I say viewer discretion advised. I don't have that on most of them, but sometimes I have kids come to the presentations and I just warn the parents ahead of time with this that there may be some things that the kiddies might not need to listen to. But y'all all seem to be adults. Hopefully you're adults and act like adults, and so we can go through this stuff a little easier. So, one point I do want to bring out, a disclaimer, so to speak, on this topic particularly, because it's been recent enough that there are still people alive that remember it. Plus, there were a lot of families involved, or possibly involved. So I like to point out at this point that I don't know everything about this case. I don't know everything about this story. None of us do. The only two people that know, one of them was killed in '52, and the other one died in 1992, and she long claimed to have no memory of what had happened. So there is a lot that I'm going to be saying today that is fact. Here's what it is. But then you'll hear me say a lot of times, supposedly, or people have said, or we think. A lot of conjecture is going to be in this presentation. A lot of things. Again, we've got facts. I'm going to go over the facts, but there are things we just don't know, and we will not know about this story. The major players have long died, and long been dead, so there's just a lot that we just don't know. So I want to say that, and you'll probably hear me say it again as we go through it, but there's a lot we just don't know about this story. Lots of things have been written, lots of things have been said, but we just don't know. Another point, try to look at this from a neutral historian standpoint, but for full disclaimer, I did have family involved in this. My great-grandparents and my great-uncle were witnesses to Ruby going back and forth into the doctor's office that Sunday morning. And so they saw her and they went into the trial and testified as witnesses that they saw her do that. So I'm stating that, just you take it as you will. I don't think it biases me to the story, but I just want to give you the heads up that my family was involved slightly with this whole story. And if your family was around here, there's a good chance yours might have been too, to be honest. I don't think it clouds my judgment or my thoughts on it. But again, I just want to be out in the open with that so people know what's going on. So, any questions or comments before we get started? Well, I want to thank y'all again all for coming. So, let's get into the details. Ruby Jackson McCollum was born August 31st, 1909 in a little place called Zuber, Florida, basically the Ocala area. She was the second child and the first daughter of her parents. There were 6 kids total. So first daughter and second child total. According to her family and the people that knew her, she was very ambitious, very intelligent, and that ambition would help her along as she went through her life, and it's going to play a part in this story as we go through it. She was also, again, very intelligent, and because of what her parents saw in her, she was sent to a private school. None of the rest of her family could basically afford to, but she was sent to Fessenden Academy there in Ocala. So her parents saw her as somebody that would be able to go somewhere, that this extra schooling, this private schooling would do her some good. She was not just going to be a farmhand or a maid or something like that. They saw bigger and better things for her. So they sent her to that academy. While she was there, she studied nursing, but she was also good in bookkeeping. So remember that as we go along with this too. She found a knack for bookkeeping. But she did, again, learn nursing through part of this academy training. Now, according to some of her acquaintances and those that knew her when she was younger, she had her eyes set on a guy. She was dating him and wanting to marry him. But then she realized maybe he was not as ambitious as she wanted, And so she saw another guy and met this other guy named Sam McCollum. And so she decided to dump the guy she was with and go after Sam. So she married Sam, and they moved up to New York, part of that great migration of African Americans during that era, 1920s, 1930s, that period of time. And so they lived there for about 5 years. The first of their children, Sam Jr., was born up in New York. Well, then in 1934, the family moved down to Fort Myers. Sam had a brother named Buck, and he was in the insurance business, and so they moved down there. But Buck was also involved in Bolita, and we'll talk more about that in just a minute. But he was involved with that, and that's where he got a lot of his money from. And so he needed Sam to kind of help with that project also. So they moved down there, lived for several years, did various businesses in Fort Myers, and amassed a good bit of money while they were working down there. Again, Ruby was involved. Supposedly, she kept the books. And that's where her bookkeeping came in. She kept the books for the Bolita project, or the Bolita, the gambling basically is what it is. And she was very experienced in that. So again, supposedly she did that. Now Bolita, what is Bolita? It's Spanish for little ball, small ball, little ball, because that's what they did. They would put the numbers on different balls, and there was various means to draw the numbers. But you recognize this today because we've had the lottery in the state of Florida, and it's been legal for several decades now. And I remember on TV growing up, you would see, a Saturday night or something, they would switch to now we're going to pull this week's lottery numbers, and they'd pop up the little balls in the machine, and the pretty woman would come grab it and show the numbers. So it's similar to that basically, just not as fancy. But they would write these numbers. So little ball, it was used basically by Latin American immigrants. And when they moved to Tampa in the 1880s, they brought this game with them, this gambling with them. People from all walks of life, from the highest down to the lowest, played it. The issue was it was illegal. So they had to do it kind of behind the scenes. Various methods were used. You could not go on TV or the radio Saturday night and say, here's the lottery numbers, winning lottery numbers. So they did a different thing. They would do things like run ads in the newspaper on a certain day with certain numbers in there, stating, all right, maybe they're for sale or wanted, but people that knew would look at that ad and they'd see, okay, here's the numbers, great, there we go. Call 555-1212. Well, there's the number for this week. Or the one I like that's pretty funny is there were some preachers that were involved in this whole system. And supposedly, like on a Sunday morning, after the numbers were pulled, they would get up and they would start out by quoting or saying, let's turn to Leviticus chapter 12, verse 11, and read through verse 31, something like that. That would inform the members that were involved in the Bolita what the numbers were. There's all kinds of different ways you hear. And it's hard to know for sure how many different ways it spread. Of course, word of mouth would be the obvious one too. But however it was spread, and a lot of people used it. And although it was illegal, it lasted a long time, and that's probably because there were a lot of politicians and law enforcement involved. Again, I have not seen any definite proof. Like it's right here in paper. People aren't going to be that stupid, I hope. But because it went on so long, and some of the stuff we're going to talk about later on in this presentation, there are some indications that politicians and some law enforcement, were involved in it. So they basically were paid to look the other way. And I know that never again happens in not only Suwannee County, but American history, where politicians accept bribes and stuff, or law. It never happens, does it? Yeah. All right. But it happened, and it would not surprise me if that's what happened too with Bolita. So the McCollum family, after going to New York and then moving down to Fort Myers for a few years, they then move up to Live Oak. They buy this beautiful, at the time anyway, beautiful two-story house on the west side of town. Probably the nicest house for African Americans in Suwannee County at that time. I have not read of any that's better, let me put it that way. And it would surprise me if somebody else had a better house than the McCollums. Apparently this house they got for a steal because the former owner was also into Bolita and he was run out of town. I've read that. So whether that's true or not, again, that's one of those, we don't know for sure things. But I have read that in a few of the books and documents. Well, Sam continued his business here, whether it was the insurance, but also supposedly the Bolita. And that's probably where he got a lot of his money. He also expanded the insurance business and went into owning several juke joints around town and in this area. He had enough money to buy up a farm outside of town that he used for hunting and getting people on the property to hunt quail and things like that. He had enough money also that every year Ruby was seen driving a new Chrysler vehicle. So they had money. They were well off. I mean, I can't buy a new car every year. Can any of y'all? Well, maybe you can. I don't know. Don't answer that. Most people, let me rephrase that, most people can't buy a brand new car every year. The McCollums could, and they did. So again, this was the home in the early 1950s. We'll talk more about it just briefly later on towards the end. So while this is going on, meanwhile, we've got another part of this story, another person in the story, and that's Clifford Leroy Adams Jr. He was born in 1908, so about a year before Ruby. He was born in Jasper, and he was from a long line of businessmen and politicians. His grandfather was Frank Adams, who had founded Barnett Banks, which was a big bank for many years. I remember growing up, even into high school, Barnett Bank helped fund our Brain Bowl trips down to Orlando for the state tournaments. So Barnett Bank was big into that, but his grandfather helped to establish that. His grandfather also was president of the Florida Senate, so very big politics. His family, not just the grandfather, but a lot of Dr. Adams' family was involved in politics in North Florida, but also on the state level. And so it has long been understood that he had political aspirations of his own. He wanted to go maybe to become governor. That was kind of his plan from what we have read and what we've heard. So as he became an adult, he went into a 6-month pharmacy program. Back then it only took 6 months and you could become a pharmacist. Well, he did that, and then he went off to the University of Arkansas and got his medical degree, where he was ranked at the bottom of his class. I mean, somebody's got to be last, right? It just happened to be him. As I have read, and as has been told throughout the years, it looks like he might have forged his acceptance letter, and also supposedly he worked at several different drugstores while he was there in Arkansas, but then was let go because the cash drawer seemed to stay low for some reason. So that is what's been told. That's what's been said. I'm guessing that probably could have been proven one way or the other. But needless to say, probably not the most upstanding of citizens. Let's put it that way. But this was not a time of instant communication. Yeah, there are phone calls and stuff, but that's long distance. You didn't have the internet posting everything you did. So a lot of this stuff did not get out to Suwannee County anyway until after the murder. But that was him. Well, he married Flora Lee Edwards from Hamilton County. They had 2 children. One son, Clifford Leroy Adams III, and then a daughter named Laverne, who married Billy Journey. So those are the 2 kids. He moved to Live Oak in 1945. His decision was probably based on politics and size. Live Oak was much bigger than Hamilton County. And politic-wise, we had a lot of influential folks around here in the 1940s. And so he moved to Live Oak to expand his doctor's practice. He was one of those doctors, like many of the time, that would make house calls. He had an office, yes, in town, across from the courthouse, but he would make those visits across town and across the county. Again, politically ambitious, and as he would go to somebody's house, it didn't matter whether they could afford to pay him or not. He would say, you know what, don't worry about paying me, just vote for me if I run for office. Or how about I take that chicken you're cooking right now, let me have some while I'm doctoring whoever up. So he would do different things to ingratiate himself to the population. He was well known for refusing money. Just vote for me at the next election that I run, that kind of stuff. He would do that. One writer, I don't remember who it was now, but one writer likened him to Huey P. Long, who would become the governor of Louisiana, but he was assassinated, I believe, in 1935, if memory serves. But he was a populist, kind of getting the people on board with me. So a lot of people liked him. My great-grandparents, they talked about him highly, of their doctor that would come out, 10 miles out of town to go see them on a regular occasions. So they liked him. They didn't really listen to all the other stuff that came out afterwards. But that was it. But a lot of people. If you ask people at the time, the 1940s, and before August 3rd, 1952, if you asked people about him, they would say high things about him, praise him. And we'll get into that a little bit also, some of the quotes from the newspaper after his death. So, lived in Live Oak. He owned this house on Walker Street, which was next door to where the hospital would be built, which was, convenient for a doctor to be by the hospital. We'll talk about that in just a minute. But one of the things that happened to him that was not common knowledge was in 1949, he was indicted for submitting fraudulent bills to the Veterans Administration, to the VA. Basically, he was claiming to have seen a lot of people in his office or to have seen them on his farm that he owned, and he didn't. So, again, not the most upstanding of people, but this was not publicly known. So as a country doctor, again, he made lots of rounds. These are a couple of his scripts from one of my coworkers years ago. She was a patient of his as a child, and so she let me scan these that she owned from Dr. Adams himself. But as a country doctor visiting people, not only his office, but out and about, one of the couples he came across and he helped was Sam and Ruby McCollium. Sam had heart trouble, so he had to have heart medicine for that, so Dr. Adams would give that to him, prescribe that to him. And also Ruby needed doctor's assistance during one of her child's births, so she needed his assistance. So that's probably where they really got acquainted for the first time. And supposedly, according to Ruby, this is after actually one of the birth of her children where Dr. Adams forced himself upon her. And she claimed this would continue for about half a dozen years until 1952 when she killed him. If this is the case, and I'm not saying it's not, I'm just throwing this out there because we don't know. This is part of that conjecture. We don't know exactly what happened or how it happened. But if that's true and he forced himself on her all these years, that would be an example of what some folks have called paramour rights. Basically, this idea, actually back from slavery days, that a black woman, a slave, so to speak, or an inferior person, would be at the beck and call of a white man, the master, so to speak, under slavery days. But basically, a white man could take a black woman as his mistress, his whatever you want to call her. And so this had been going through history, not just American history, but world history, for centuries. And it happened even after slavery was outlawed in the South, and to an extent also to the North. But again, it's not one of those things you really talked about. It was kind of hush-hush. We've got examples, and I've talked about some of them, I think, in the previous presentations, about those white slave owners who appear to have had children by their slaves. So it's not unique to Dr. Adams if that's what happened, but it is one of those things that did happen. Other sources, some of them even who knew Ruby growing up and as a young woman, claimed that it was actually she that had started this relationship. She was the one. And again, this is we don't know, supposedly, so-and-so says, but they claim that she started the relationship because Dr. Adams had high political aspirations and connections. Ruby already had the most well-off black man in the county. Why not go for the best connected white man in the county as they go? Also, a fact is Sam McCollum had been having affairs. He actually had a child in at least one of these affairs because we've got the documentation at the courthouse where he admitted to being the father of a child with a child support case, basically. So he had had at least one affair, several is what it looks like from the records. but he was sleeping around, and so it's possible that maybe she was sleeping with Dr. Adams to get back at Sam. Again, we don't know. It's possible. We just do not know. Also, according to Ruby herself, Dr. Adams became involved in the Bolita business. Basically, he was providing a front. He was providing connections for Sam. Kind of hush-hush money was paid back in return. So, according to her, Dr. Adams never had enough money. He was always wanting more, so he got himself more and more involved in this Bolita scheme that the McCollums were running. And so this maybe was a way for both of them to get money out of it, get something out of it. So again, we don't know. These are not facts, most of them. They are suppositions, rumors, hearsay, comments, suggestions. We just don't know. But what else was going on during this time period? It's post-World War II. World War II ends 1945. We've got people coming back from Europe, from the Pacific, men mainly who are getting back into the workforce, getting back into politics. And one of them is named Fuller Warren. He is elected during this period of our history as governor of Florida. And he's from Jacksonville. One of his pledges is to fight racism. And he really is speaking openly against the KKK, Ku Klux Klan, which has been big in Florida off and on for many years. But the KKK had been an issue, not just in Suwannee County, but all of Florida. In a transcript from 1949 of January, he says, "The hooded hoodlums and sheeted jerks who had paraded the streets of Tallahassee last night made a disgusting and alarming spectacle. These covered cowards who call themselves Klansmen quite obviously have set out to terrorize minority groups in Florida as they have in a nearby state." So he is speaking openly against the KKK. Now the ironic thing is, before World War II, he was in the KKK. So he was involved, but then after that he says, quote, "I fought a war to fight a war to destroy the Nazis, the first cousins to the Klansmen." So World War II has changed him, and he realizes, you know what, these folks are an issue, and I want to stamp it out. In 1951, he signs a law that forbids the wearing of, here's how it's kind of worded, forbids the wearing of masks in public or on private property without the written permission of the owner. Well, that pretty much does not say KKK, but who else would be doing that without permission of the owner? It's the KKK that are doing rallies and stuff and terrorizing people. So he signs this bill into law in 1951, basically against the KKK. He's trying to fight this racism. However, he is also one of the politicians, supposedly, who is receiving money from Bolita, from that illegal gambling. So he's stamping out one illegal, immoral practice over here, but then he's probably taking kickbacks from another one. Well, the federal government decides to try to investigate this matter. And he refused to cooperate with them. He basically claimed it was a states' rights issue, and I'm not going to cooperate with the federal government, on this matter. Well, he left office in 1953 after one term. He didn't run again, basically. So a one-termer, and then he was out. Could be a coincidence, maybe not. Well, at the same time in Suwannee County, we've got some political elections going on too. Sim Howell was elected in late 1948. He ran on three major platforms. Number one, the delivery and sale of liquor. Number two, punch boards and pinball machines. Number three, Bolita and all other forms of gambling. So those are his three major premises that he's running on. He had law enforcement experience. He retired from the Jacksonville Police Department. So he was not a newcomer to law enforcement. He barely defeated the write-in candidate, who was Colin B. Barnes at the time. Barnes basically had been appointed acting sheriff by the governor because the previous sheriff, Arch Hunter, had died of a heart attack while he was running in early 1948 while he was campaigning for another term. So Arch Hunter died, and then McCollum Barnes was appointed and then ran against Sim Howell. Howell won, barely, but he won and became sheriff. While he was campaigning, besides those 3 points, he claimed that he would get rid of the numbers racket. He added that, quote, Suwannee County wasn't big enough for him and Belita Sam. Belita Sam was the nickname that Sam McCollum had received because of his money-making schemes from Belita. So, when Sim Howell is elected sheriff and goes into office, Sam McCollum actually leaves town for a few months, about 8 months. He flees town, decides maybe this guy's going to hunt me down and stop my business. But after about 8 months, he realizes, you know what? He's not doing anything about Melita. So Sam comes back to town, continues on with his business as usual. So, big words, but really doesn't do anything about it. Not much anyway. So this is Suwannee County, close to 1952. The best one I have, the map, is from 1958. And it's actually from the cover of a booklet put out by the county commissioners talking about 100 years of Suwannee County's history, because we were established as a county in 1858. So it shows a map of Suwannee County along with some of the major products, things like cattle, hogs, watermelons, tobacco, peanuts, those kinds of things. So it shows also the major communities, places like Live Oak and Dowling Park and Branford, O'Brien, Wellborn, those kinds of places, along with major roads and the railroad. So Suwannee County is still primarily agriculture at this point. We have a lot of political say because of the way the maps were still drawn at that point around the state level. So to be honest, we had an inordinate amount of sway in politics because they were not redistricting yet for all that growth in the south part of the state. That would change in a few years. So Suwannee County, there we go. Other things, other events and other places during this era we're looking at. This is the Blue Lodge, circa 1950, owned by a guy named Laverne Blue. We talked about him a couple months ago in the presentation series. It's west of Live Oak. Most people recognize it because of its entranceway, that nice gateway that's now been shut down, closed off, where you can't come in anyway. But this was built in the 1930s as a motor court. And by this point in the 1940s, early 1950s, it supposedly is being used by Dr. Adams and others for illicit affairs. Affairs for sure, and maybe some drug use and other things supposedly going on there at the Blue Lodge. Supposedly. This is a picture of downtown Live Oak, Howard Street looking west at the main intersection. And there's another angle from the same intersection. There is the 1940s picture looking north on Ohio Avenue. Courthouse there on the left, Suwannee Hotel to the immediate right, and just past that, really can't see, but part of the top of it is the Parsley Building, which is where Dr. Adams' office was. That is the Suwannee County Hospital, which was built in 1948. It was the first hospital built under the Hill-Burton Act, the federal act which provided assistance for rural communities to build their own hospitals that could not otherwise afford it. So Dr. Adams was involved in getting that here. And as I said earlier, for some reason, it just happened to be next door to his house. It kind of worked out that way. For those of you who've been in my presentation for a while, this was the location of Florida Memorial College, which was one of our two African American colleges we had in Live Oak in the late 1800s and early 1900s. So Florida Memorial College had moved on to merge with the St. Augustine-based college by this point, and so the buildings had been torn down, sold and torn down to make room for this hospital. This is the Parsley Building, which is across the street, or was across the street from the courthouse. built on some of the original Parsley property. Actually, John and Nancy Parsley, who helped make Live Oak what it is, their house was located on this site, just behind it where the parking lot is today for the Work Nest and Ameris Bank. That's where it is today. So you can see where it's even noted on here, his office where it was in the building. The building had been constructed in, I think, 1904. After Mrs. Parsley had passed away, her descendants had sold the property, or built the property and then sold it off. This is a picture of the courthouse circa 1950. You will see there on the left-hand side, that is a memorial to those who had served in World War II. And it stayed there until the 1950s when it was finally torn down as just an eyesore. That stayed there for about 10 years or so, honoring those who had served in World War II. So, things kind of kept progressing until 1948, when Ruby McCollium gave birth to Loretta. Daughter here. As people noted, she was a little bit on the light side when she was born, but even as Sam Jr., the brother, mentioned, a lot of African American babies are light when they're born, but it was obvious after a short amount of time that Sam was not the father of Loretta. It was obvious. Ruby testified on the witness stand in her trial that Dr. Adams was the father. And when you look at pictures of her and him, I can see the resemblance, the face especially. Now this was a picture of her child. I don't have any that I'll post of her as an adult. I'm not sure I've got any, to be honest. But as of December 2014, when Sam McCollum Jr. passed away, she was the last of the McCollum children still alive. Lives in New Jersey, last I heard. So, anyway, she claimed that it was the child of Dr. Adams. Again, she was very liked. So Sam was not the father. All right, so we're getting closer to the murder. As the 1950s roll around, we've got Belita coming out to the open. It's been going around privately for years here in the surrounding counties. Whispers maybe that Sam McCollum was running the show, but nothing concrete. Well, what happened is the federal government decides, if we can't get rid of this, let's at least tax it. That's what the government does, right? So they basically pass a law that requires gamblers to purchase an occupational gambling tax stamp. It's like, all right, we can't stamp this kind of stuff out, but maybe we can get some money out of it. So they require these stamps to be paid to the IRS, collected to the IRS. In 1952, the Suwannee Democrat, which was our local paper at the time for many, many years, reported that 322 of these stamps were issued in the entire state. 322. Of those, 10 of them were in Suwannee County. So 10 out of 300 were from Suwannee County. All of them were African Americans. The names were Edna White, Charles Hall, Annie Lumpkins, William Manker, M.R. Williams, C.S. Ivy, Henry Matt, Catherine Swain, M.M. Wade, and Sam McCollum. So, it's finally out in the open who the gamblers are, at least the ones that are admitting to it are. And it's interesting that they are all African American. It's also interesting, the Suwannee Democrat pointed out, Suwannee County number-wise was fifth number-wise with the ones who purchased stamps. So out of the counties, there were only 4 other counties in the state that had more gambling stamps done. That was despite the fact that Suwannee County had a much smaller population. So what that says is Suwannee County had a gambling problem, or at least willing to admit it through this tax. Louis Wadsworth. Louis C. Wadsworth was the longtime editor of the Suwannee Democrat. He was in the National Guard. He served in World War II. He would later become the head of the National Guard here in Florida. Our armory that we have is the Louis Wadsworth Armory, named after him. So he was big in the military, but he also was big into the newspapers. And he owned the Suwannee Democrat and was the editor for many, many years. And he started asking people to crack down on this, asking citizens to stop doing it, and he asked law enforcement to start cracking down on this illegal numbers game. He also added, hey, elections are coming up. We've got several law enforcement related elections especially. Pick people that will try to stamp this out. So for a lot of months, many, many months in late 1951, early 1952, Louis Wadsworth, as editor, is posting lots of editorials trying to get people focused on this gambling problem that we have in Suwannee County. And he actually points out that, you know what, Sam McCollum may be the person in charge, but he may just be a front man for somebody, maybe a white man who's actually in charge. That's what he was thinking. So he was firmly against it. Democrat also called out Sam McCollum as the kingpin, and they described him as like Amos from Amos and Andy, the old radio team, that he was like the Amos, kind of in charge of it. Another thing that the newspaper pointed out, that unlike some of those other folks that had the gambling the stamp, people like William Manker, who was running a cab business, or Charles Hall, who ran a funeral home, Sam McCollum at this point really didn't have any respectable business that was the front for it. He just basically was more or less openly doing the Bolita, and that's where he was getting all his money. Another thing Louis Wadsworth did was he checked the addresses of those people that had gotten the stamps and found that both their businesses and their residences were within a couple blocks of the schools in downtown Live Oak, but also of City Hall, places like that, law enforcement were just around the corner, literally. And yet nothing was being done to stamp this out. So he is calling on them to do something about this issue. In the meantime, Dr. Adams is running for office. He's running for the Senate, like his grandfather before him. So all this is all going on at once, same time. This is one of his couple of editorials about him, state senator, born and lived on the life in the 7th Senatorial District, or 17th, which was this area. Graduated from Jasper High, has a first grade teacher certificate. He's a registered pharmacist, et cetera, et cetera. He's got a list of things that he has done, a list of things that I understand you, and I'm one of you, those kinds of things. Well, as that's going on, Sim Howell, who has been the sheriff again this is his first term as sheriff, and despite his pledge to stamp out Bolita and all those other gambling things that were illegal, has not happened. He has not been able to stop it. He commented that the state's laws on it were very lax, and, quote, the best people of Live Oak played it. So it was kind of hard for him to take care of it. Actually, in 1951, only one person in Suwannee County was arrested for Bolita, and those charges were dropped and thrown out by the state attorney at the time, who was A.K. Black in Lake City. So what little was done really got nowhere. So as the Democrat is running for months on end, you can probably check him out on the microfilm here at the library. We've got some of the paper copies at the courthouse. But as you read through it, you see about every volume that comes out is speaking out against this. And he's trying to turn people against it. He's asking questions. He's got other people commenting in the newspaper. One of them is Bill Ware, who was a well-known, long-time druggist from Branford. And Bill Ware says, asking of Sheriff Howell, says, what about Bolita Sam? He operates more or less openly, and everybody says he is head of the rackets up there in Live Oak. Why haven't you been able to do anything about it? Well, Howell replies, I've tried. I've even raided his house, but I can't find what I need to be able to get him convicted. Well, these months of editorials against him and against law enforcement forces Sim Howell to decide in early 1952, I'm a one and done person. I'm not going to run for re-election. as he quotes up in here, he says, it was prompted by, quote, by allegiance to himself and his family, whatever that means. But he decides not to run, and he does it very early in the election cycle to allow somebody else time to run. So that's what happened. He basically bows out. He thanks them for his one term in office, and he's going to retire to his farm in O'Brien. So that is on January 25th, 1952. 5 days later, Sonny Adams, who was Clifford Leroy Adams III, the only son of Dr. Adams, dies in a car crash in Texas while he's serving in the Air Force. Young man. And that death is devastating to Dr. Adams and his wife, Lori. As it would be with any person losing a child. And especially a son of a family who wants to have a legacy. So there will be no more Adamses from Dr. Adams. So that happens. Meanwhile, Ruby McCollum is going to Brewster Hospital, I believe, for some psychiatric treatments 2 or 3 times during this era. In between, like after Sonny Adams dies, and then a few months later, when Dr. Adams is elected to the Senate, Ruby goes back into the hospital for a little while too for some mental evaluations and stuff. So Dr. Adams is elected, but he's waiting for his predecessor's term to finish out before he is sworn into office. Well, shortly after that, Ruby, once she's back from the hospital, she is a regular visitor to Dr. Adams's doctor's office across from the courthouse. It gets to the point where she keeps wanting to speak to him about personal matters, and the doctor won't see him. And towards the end, it's every day. She is stopping by wanting to see Dr. Adams, and he refuses to see her, refuses to have anything to do with her. So on Sunday morning, August 3rd, 1952, Ruby McCollum walks into the doctor's office and shoots him dead. The original claim is that it was about money. I think it's in this article actually, which was the next newspaper afterwards. We've got a copy of it downstairs in the courthouse, and again, there should be a microfilm version of it here in the library. The claim is that it was about a bill, because there was a bill and money found in Dr. Adams's pen. But maybe it was over this bill that she was arguing about, and she shot him in anger. Well, whatever the reason, not everybody was happy that that had happened, because again, Dr. Adams was very popular. And so it sounds like a mob is forming, and so law enforcement, after Ruby shows them where she's thrown the gun at her house, they take her over out of town basically for her own safety, and perhaps maybe to hide her from other people. That's one of those we don't know things. But regardless, she is whisked away from town for protection. Put it that way. This is the back door of Dr. Adams' office, the quote-unquote colored entrance. This is a time of racism, a time of segregation still. Jim Crow laws are in effect. So this is the back African-American door entrance. Now, when Sam gets word of Ruby, what Ruby has done from a friend, he basically runs back home, gets the kids, packs up a few belongings, packs up some money, supposedly up to $100,000 worth, and then heads down to Ocala where most of the family resides. So he goes down there, leaves the children with family. Now, Sam Jr. is off at UCLA. He's already in college, wanting to be a doctor, but the other kids are younger. They're still at home, so he takes them down to family in Ocala. And then the next day, he dies. Supposedly of a heart attack. Again, he had heart issues, known heart issues. Some people have said maybe he was murdered. I'm not sure about that. Charles Hall, who was one of the last known associates to live of this deal. He was one of the folks involved in the bleed and such. Charles Hall claimed that Sam took all the heart medicine at once. He basically committed suicide because he understood what Ruby had done. He understood the ramifications to himself, and he did not want to be a part of that. And so he decided it was easier to get the kids in with family, and let me just kill myself because of what I know. We don't know for sure. Those are just different thoughts. None of us know. Only Sam knows. And he's not talking. Evidence-wise, this is the supposed gun used by Ruby McCollium. This gun, last I heard, it was the same caliber, and it's in the possession of the son of the clerk of the court at that time. The clerk of the court's office, of which I'm a part of. We are the ones that accept evidence for court cases. We're the ones that hold it. We store them away. I've got other evidence from the Ruby McCollum trial at our office. This gun is not in our possession. It is in the possession of the son of the clerk at the time, which was Mr. Rowland. And so it makes sense that this might be the gun. We don't know for sure. The court case had no serial numbers listed, and so nobody today is 100% sure. Again, the folks that knew are gone now. But it would not surprise me if this is the gun because of the owner, the current owner, or last I heard anyway, the owner. Now, one interesting thing about this gun is at the time of the murder, 1952, this gun had been built about 1915. So it was an old gun, about 40 years old. Smith & Wesson 32 caliber. It's a Smith & Wesson 1903 model. 32 caliber, which was the same caliber used to kill Dr. Adams. But again, it's 40 years old. And so some people think that indicates Ruby was not the one that murdered her. So why would she use a 40-year-old gun? That she should have a newer gun because she was wealthy. I'm not going to ask for a show of hands, but I'm sure some of you collect guns. Some of you have guns. I myself have some guns, some of which are more than 80 years old and still work just fine. I mean, age is just a number when it comes to weapons, especially something like that, good quality all the time. It worked just fine. If it ain't broke, don't fix it, kind of thought. That's one thing. Another thing is it was harder under Jim Crow laws for African Americans to get guns. So she had one, it served the purpose. Another point is an older gun made it harder to track who had purchased it, because it's been 40 years. Who knows how many times it's been passed around? Whatever the reason, this was probably the gun that was used. And just because it's old doesn't mean she wouldn't have used it. I mean, again. Some of you probably are carrying on you right now, wouldn't surprise me. Guns that are older than kids, that are 20 years old or more. They're good guns. Other evidence. I'm not going to ask for a show of hands, for sure. Other evidence, things we still have in the courthouse today. The bullets that were recovered. When they did recover them, they took them to a local jeweler and had them marked by the jeweler so they would know which one, it was bullet number 1, number 2, number 3, when the court trial came up. So you can see, this is me holding them with cotton gloves. You can see these little dimple things up there, and over on the right, there's 4 of them. So that was bullet number 2, and that's bullet number 4. Out of the 4, I believe, that were recovered from either Dr. Adams' body or the frame of the door around where he was shot. So that was a common practice. Some people look at it today and say, oh, no, they were tampering with evidence. Well, today, yes, that will be considered tampering with evidence. Back then, that was normal. We have to be careful when we look at stuff, when we look at old history or old court cases, to look at it upon as a evidence of the times. That just because today that would be obvious tampering with evidence, back then that was a normal practice, not just here, but all over the country. They didn't know anything like DNA and things like that. So what did it matter? We know this is the bullet. Let's mark it so we don't lose track of which one's which. So just be aware of that as we go through this trial. There are some things that today would not have happened, but that was normal back then. So Dr. Adams was dead. He had a funeral, and he was buried in the Live Oak Cemetery. This is his tombstone. And shortly after his death, the Democrat, Suwannee Democrat, runs lots of articles and lots of comments from folks about him. This is one of the editorials. A friend, a leader is lost in Dr. C. Leroy Adams. That was Louis Wadsworth speaking, same guy that's been against Bolita and all these other things. So at this time, he has no idea that Dr. Adams may be involved in it. He and a lot of other people think that too, very highly of Dr. Adams. Here's some of the quotes in that and some other articles. He was a friend and a leader. I just read that. His closest acquaintances knew that his basic philosophy was, quote, do unto others as you do have them do unto you. Another one said, quote, he was truly everybody's friend. Another one said, quote, his funeral was the largest and most sincerely attended in the history of the county. And then another one, this one's really funny as we go through the process. Quote, Dr. Adams was as sound economically as the American dollar. Well, maybe not. So, Ruby again is charged. She's charged with first-degree murder. She goes to trial, and the trial is held by Judge Hal Adams. Now then, one point to bring out that some people from not around here don't realize, there's no relation here. Dr. Adams is in no way related to Judge Hal Adams. Hal Adams is from Missouri. Dr. Adams was from Hamilton County. Judge Adams moved down to Lafayette County in like 1901, 1902. And by this point in 1952, he has been serving as a judge for nearly 50 years. First as a county judge in Lafayette County, and then as circuit judge, I think starting in the 1930s. So he's a very experienced judge. He goes on to serve basically 60 years before he retires, and then he dies in 1968. He retires in 1961 and dies in 1968. One of the things, and I believe I commented it a few months ago when we talked about it the first time, this man was known for a few things. Number one, he had a spittoon. You can see in the back corner, that white. He'd chew tobacco and would use that spittoon in court. Didn't matter. He also liked to wear bow ties and usually a black suit, from what I've been told. So that was Judge Adams. You might know him if you go down to Louisville, go through Louisville into Lafayette County, because that bridge is named after him. Judge Hal Adams Bridge. So they called the jury venire. There were 130 potential jurors called. One interesting note, one of the several things that are interesting with this trial, is for the first time in Suwannee County's history that anybody knows anyway, this is the first time the jury pool included African Americans. There were 8 of them pooled. This is the first time in our history that anybody knows of. Before that, it was just white people. So 8 African Americans are called. 7 of them are quickly disqualified. 6 of them because they were patients of Dr. Adams. And then another one had an issue with the spelling of his name. So he was thrown out of the jury venire and was not chosen. And as it was, when they went through all the 130 names, ended up that no African Americans served on the jury. But it was a start. The fact that African Americans were being pulled into this jury pool was a good start for Suwannee County. There was a request for the change of venue, like let's move it out of Live Oak, there's too much involved, let's move it to another county or another district. Judge Adams refused it, began the trial. When the trial began, and as the witnesses came forward, again including some of my relatives, they claimed that Ruby was the murderer. Not only white people, but African Americans that had been there at the doctor's office at the time claimed that she was the one who had killed Dr. Adams. One of the interesting stories even about my family that I did not learn until after my great-grandfather's death was when I read the court transcript the first time. Found out that my great-grandfather basically had a heart episode on the stand. And so I asked my great-grandmother about it because she was still alive. And she said, oh yeah, he hated getting up in front of people. It was hot. It was August. No air conditioning. The courthouse, the main courtroom is on the 2nd floor. Heat rises. Lots of people there. It was just too much for him, so he basically had a heart episode and had to go to the hospital. So that was something I didn't know. I wish I'd been able to ask him when he was still alive. But basically, it is pointed out, and it is pretty obvious by all the witness accounts, that Ruby is the one that shot Dr. Adams. This is her actually being escorted out of the courthouse in December of 1952 after another day of the trial. Now, according to the information that abounded, not just during the trial, but after the trial, it seemed like Dr. Adams had already fathered one child with her, and she was supposedly pregnant again by him, supposedly. She wanted to get rid of the baby. Dr. Adams wanted to keep it. Sam, her husband, wanted to get rid of the baby. Dr. Adams wanted to keep it. Supposedly, also according to her, Dr. Adams was giving her drugs, things even maybe up to heroin level of drugs, according to her. Other things that came out, according to some folks, Dr. Adams was forging wills. Even of long-time quote-unquote friends, he was forging their wills, supposedly, so that when they died, he would get their property. Even the Blue Lodge, Mr. Blue, was one of those, supposedly, who had his will forged by Dr. Adams. No way, again, to prove it, but it has tarnished Dr. Adams' reputation big way. It's been over 70 years, and it's still things we just do not know. His wife, Dr. Adams' wife, Florrie, did not pass away until 2014. She was 105 years old. I remember seeing her in the nursing home many times because I had some relatives that were there, and I would go visit them, and she'd be sitting there. Her mind was pretty much gone by then, but just interesting to see her, to know what she had gone through over the years. Eventually, after all these witnesses have come forward, Ruby herself took to the stand. From many accounts, this is supposedly the first time an African American woman goes before the jury to state, to take the stand, basically to state that she bore a white man's baby. Don't know whether that's true or not. I've read that in several books and some other places. But it was a big deal that she was able to get up there and do that. When you start reading through the testimony carefully, the court transcripts and those kinds of things, you will find that her story changed from day to day. One day she'd say one thing, the next day she'd say something different. Even her age. One day she'd say she was this age, another day she'd say she was another age. Sometimes her story is actually kind of incoherent when you start reading through it carefully. The problem is a lot of people take her testimony at face value. It's like, oh, this is true. Everything she said is the gospel. It's her testimony. And to be honest, the only other person that knew for sure was 6 feet under the ground at that point. So she could say whatever she wanted to. I'm not saying she did, but I'm just saying she could have said whatever she wanted. Nobody was going to know. Her husband was dead. Dr. Adams was dead. She claims a lot of things which may or may not have been true. But again, her story is very inconsistent. So when you look at it like that, it just begs a lot of questions. She was cross-examined by the state, and there were a lot of gaps found in her testimony. Like she claimed that Dr. Adams attacked her, and she shot him in self-defense, but he was shot in the back. I don't know too many people who attack people from their backside, when we go attack him. So, there's lots of things in her testimony when you read through it that just don't make sense. They don't make sense. Plus, every witness, white and black, that were there, said something different. So it was her against everybody else in what she was claiming. Now, there were some objections by the defense. They were often overruled by the judge. There was some of the books that have come out, about some of the early books especially that have come out about this trial, about this case, claim that the judge overruled every defense argument. That's not true. When you read through the testimony, you'll read that sometimes, not a lot, but maybe 15, 20% of the time, the judge sides with the defense attorney. So you have to be careful when you read through stuff, because it's not always according to what the records state. So as this trial is starting up, it is known that it's going to be a big deal. So the Pittsburgh Courier, which is one of the preeminent African-American newspapers of the day, they contacted this woman here, Zora Neale Hurston. She's an author, she's an anthropologist. They asked her to go down to Florida and cover this trial. Now, Zora Neale Hurston was famous for her book entitled Their Eyes Were Watching God. I didn't read it, but maybe you've watched it, or read it, excuse me. She also wrote something called Seraph on the Suwannee, which was kind of historical fiction that she wrote, based on a husband and wife, North Florida cracker couple, that are dealing with their issues of their place in life, because they're poor folks. So she's got a lot of knowledge of this area. Also, she had covered the South before, and she had seen firsthand evidence of what was called those paramour rights, where a black woman was taken by a white man by force. So she was very well aware of the situation that had been around, not just in Florida, but all over. And so she agrees to cover it, because by this point in her life, she's in the waning years of her career. She's not getting a lot of money in, and to be honest, she just needs the money. So she comes down and covers the trial. She's kind of surprised and upset that the judge has issued a gag order. So she is not able to talk to Ruby, nor is she getting a lot of help from the African American community. They don't want to talk to her about the situation. So even though she doesn't get any of that information, or any information from Ruby herself, she writes a series of articles in the Pittsburgh Courier, which goes out pretty much nationwide. It brings this trial to the national spotlight, this issue to the national spotlight. But again, she is not able to interview Ruby. Most African Americans will not talk to her. So it looks like she fabricated some stuff to make a good story. But again, this is one of those cases where you can't take everything as gospel that she says. I would equate what she wrote to more of a based on a true story. So there's some truth to it, but I've thrown in my own thoughts and embellishments. That's what it appears to, based upon her rendition of the story versus the court transcript and everybody else. For instance, one of the things she often has been quoted on is that defense attorney at the time, Frank Cannon, said, quote, "May God forgive you, Judge Adams, for robbing a human being of life in such a fashion." And that's used by many people to show the bias of Judge Adams against Ruby McCollium and against her defense attorneys. The problem is, verbatim court transcript says nothing of that. It's not in there. Another thing she claims is that one of the witnesses, an African American by the name of Thelma Curry, was thrown off the witness stand and told to, quote, "go back to where she belonged." That's not in there either. Plus, none of the witnesses, none of the folks that were in the trial and watching it made any comment about that. So it seems like she kind of made these things up. Let's see. That first trial, Ruby is found guilty of first-degree murder. She is sentenced to execution. But as a standard, the defense appealed. And it goes all the way to the Supreme Court of Florida, and they overturn the decision of the court on a technicality. So a second trial is going to have to be held. And Zora can't really afford to come back, so she asked a guy by the name of William Bradford Huey, who's originally from Alabama, to come cover the trial for her and for the newspapers, and she would provide him with all of her information. So this is her in about 1938, when she was at the height of her popularity. William Bradford Huey of Alabama was a respected author and a newspaper reporter, very big into civil rights. Very big into civil rights. This is before Martin Luther King is on the national stage, Rosa Parks, those kinds of things. It's very early in the civil rights movement, but he's big into it. So he comes to Live Oak to cover this second trial, and he very quickly begins gathering information about Dr. Adams, Ruby McCollum, and others. So much, in fact, that he is charged with contempt of court by Judge Adams, because basically he's now tampering with witnesses. He is doing things outside of the scope of the law of the time. And basically he is told he's got to pay a fine or go to jail He could have paid the fine, he had the money, but he decides to make a point and goes to jail. So you can say he spent a night in jail for Ruby McCollum. And then he is told to get out of town the next day. He leaves. Once everything is over, he writes a book, the first book about Ruby McCollum. When you read the book, you find it's as much about him as it is about the trial. And he makes like the cardinal mistake of reporters. He becomes a part of the story. Instead of reporting on the story, he becomes a part of the story. But regardless, his book, Ruby McCollium, Woman in Suwannee Jail, is published. It's basically banned in Florida. Live Oak Library probably still has one, maybe one copy. Last time I checked, I think there was a 4 to 5 month waiting list on it. It's hard to find. I've got a copy of it, or a copy of that was purchased for me as a Christmas present by a relative. But they're hard to find and they're expensive when you do find them. But he wrote this, and it was hard to find because, again, it's pretty much banned in Florida. So what would happen is, I've been told by people, they would just go up to like Valdosta and buy it. Just go into Georgia and buy it. Danny Hales, who was in charge of the libraries here for many decades, he told me that his dad was a conductor on the train. He was from Kentucky. And he was a conductor on a train that would come through Florida from time to time. So he would stock up on those books and then sell them at the stops to make some money. Sell them, I'm sure, at a little bit of a markup. So interesting stuff. One interesting thing is, despite what William Bradford Huey writes about Ruby McCollum in his books, in later years when he was recorded in audio, he basically said, he says, right out says, she deserved to die. She murdered the doctor. She deserved to be executed for it. So despite writing books which kind of helped her and brought the issues to light, he believes she was guilty and should have got an electric chair for it. So this first trial, again, thrown out by the Florida Supreme Court. The reason behind it is because the judge did not go with the jury when they visited the scene of the crime, which was across the street at the courthouse. The judge did not go with them, and that was part of the law at the time, was that you had to go see it. It's interesting because Judge, again, I've already said, Judge Adams has been a judge for decades at this point. He was not a new judge. You'd think he might have known to do that. Some people have suggested, don't know for sure, some people have suggested that he was doing that to give Ruby a way out. To give, because it was obvious she had done the murder, but to give a way out maybe to do something else. Don't know for sure. But regardless, a second trial was ordered. And by this point, it had been about 2 years later, so we're in 1954, because of all the appeal process back and forth. Well, Ruby has been in the Suwannee County Jail all this time, pretty much. Her mental state has gone the wrong direction. It's deteriorated. She is thinking that her food is poisoned. She is thinking that the jailers are pumping poison gas into her cell, things like that. She's gotten to the point where she is only taking food when her brother, Matt Jackson, brings it to her. Otherwise, she's not eating. She's not mentally there anymore, really. And so as that second trial begins, doctors come and study her and examine her and say, you know what, she's not fit to stand trial. She's just not there. She's lost it pretty much. For whatever reason, she has lost it. And so she is ordered to go to the state mental institution in Chattahoochee until such time as she is fit to stand trial. Well, while she's there, Jet Magazine interviews her. They found her to be competent. They find her to be very, nice. She talks about wanting to return home. She wants to go back to Live Oak. She enjoyed it more than any place, and she wants to go there. That second trial is never held. She stays in Chattahoochee for 20 years. Normally 10 years was the average for people. She stayed for 20 years, and then in 1974, Frank Cannon, her old defense attorney, helps to get her released as part of some new laws that have changed in the state. And she is released. She moves down to Ocala with some of her family, and she lives there until 1992 when she dies. She claims to have no memory of what happened, And because of the circumstances at that institution, where they had shock therapy, drugs, those kinds of things, she claims not to remember what happened. And it's very possible because of, I guess we'd call it torture today, she wouldn't know. She died again in 1992. She's buried at Hopewell Baptist Church Cemetery, north of Live Oak. This is a picture of her shortly before her release. She always wanted to come back to Live Oak. That is a picture of her tombstone at Hopewell Baptist. So this murder, this story, has several things as we get close to the end. Close to the end. Historical impact. First off, these long-held ideas, beliefs that a white man can take a black woman against her will was kind of put out in the open. It had been, again, going on kind of underneath the public's understanding, but it becomes public knowledge. Everybody knows about it now, and hopefully that stopped it or more or less kept it from continuing. Let's see. Secondly, as far as is known, it's the first time an African-American woman takes the stand anywhere in the United States on her behalf to say where she had a child with a white man that was forced on her. This is before Rosa Parks, before Martin Luther King, so in a way it's a civil rights moment. Thirdly, for the first time in our history, Suwannee County, we have African Americans called to be part of the jury pool. Step in the right direction. So over the years, lots of books are written, especially again starting with that first one from William Bradford Huey. Documentaries, especially since 2000, it seems like a lot of books have come out, a lot of documentaries have come out. I was in one of them actually. Very interesting, some of the things I learned from it, just from listening to relatives, friends of Ruby and such. There's been talks in Hollywood about having a movie for decades. Hadn't happened yet. Not sure if it ever is going to. Last I heard, it was going to have Burt Reynolds as Judge Adams, but Burt's dead, so we don't know. Had several big names, big actors involved, but who knows? This is the McCollum home, as it was in, I think, about 2015 or 16. Basically, Sam Jr. did not finish his degree in UCLA to be a doctor. He kind of went into the family business, so to speak, because he spent 10 years in federal prison for tax evasion. And he came back home and basically lived there quietly. And towards the end, he actually was just living in the car, for what I've been told, and allowed the house basically to deteriorate. People had been in there over the years trying to see if they could find money, Bolita money and stuff like that. So the house was not in good shape, and it's just, since then it has fallen down upon itself. It's not there. People have talked about restoring it, but good luck. It's pretty much, it's gone. That is Dr. Adams' house recently. So, that has the end, but I've got a couple comments, questions, and such. Again, we don't know for sure what all happened. We have some facts. We have some suppositions, some comments, some hearsay. We just don't know for sure what all happened. How much did Ruby know? How much was Dr. Adams involved? I've come to the conclusion that pretty much the only innocent party out of those was Florrie Jernigan, Florrie, the doctor's wife, who later became a Jernigan. She married a Jernigan. She married her daughter's father-in-law, actually. I think she was probably innocent. Sam was guilty of stuff. I think Dr. Adams was guilty of stuff. And I think Ruby was guilty of stuff too. And it's some of the things that these documentaries, these books don't answer. And even the documentary I was videoed in, I don't agree with their conclusions. I've got questions, things like, if Ruby was the innocent pawn of Dr. Adams and he had continued to force herself upon him for all those years. Number one, why did she continue going to him as a doctor? There were lots of other doctors just in Live Oak, let alone the surrounding area. She had a new car every year. She could have driven wherever she wanted to. They took other trips for things. Why not go to another doctor? Number two, if he was doing this, continue to do this to her for all these years, why does she keep going to him at the doctor's office trying to see him about personal matters? And even up daily before he was killed. Why would she want to go see him that often? Would you want to, I'm just asking, throwing this question out, don't answer, it's a rhetorical question. Would you want to be around the person that had been victimizing you for years? I would think not. I would think not. If Dr. Adams was continuing to force himself upon her for all those years, why didn't she just move? Of any African American family in Suwannee County, they had the means to move. They had the money, they had the connections, they had already been in New York and Fort Myers, they could have moved, but they didn't. If he kept forcing himself upon her for all those years, why does she love Live Oak and want to come back? Why would she want him to come back here if it was bad stuff happening to her here that's being forced upon her? Those are some of the questions I've got that have never been answered. And again, we don't know for sure. We don't know. There are some things we do know, and there are some things we don't. And some possibilities I've thrown out there. You may have your own thoughts about it. They're probably just as good as another. We just do not know what happened with this story. But here's what I'm presenting, what I told you. Hopefully you've learned a thing or two. And I know we're about out of time. And I've got the presentation. It's over. Next month, if you want to come back, we're talking about the 1950s after Hurricane Dora.